I cannot stress this enough, you guys. I needed Spellbound right now. Like, even though I do have my criticisms, because of course this is a Calxiyn cares too much video, that is what we are all expecting. After these, like, truly nothing animated movie musicals like Wish and Moana 2, I am just finally glad that we have an animated movie fantasy fairy tale musical that actually made me feel something, that is also not a jukebox musical. Like, I feel like it's been years since we've gotten something, and it probably has been. Like, Encanto came out years ago, and so it literally has been years, and no wonder I'm so excited. In terms of, like, the controversy with this movie, though, I'm not gonna talk about it in this video. I have a fun idea to talk about it in a different video that may be up already by the time you're watching this, but I am not gonna, like, talk about the people that are review bombing because the idea of the American family is under attack and all of that BS. Like, I am just gonna focus on my own opinion as a professional musical theater performer and songwriter, and focusing on everything that I think was done well, what I think could have been done a little bit better, like this could have used more time to cook, but I don't think it's as bad as what people are telling you. I honestly don't, and I'm a little bit baffled, and we'll talk about that. For the sake of a fair perspective, I watched this with my boyfriend, who is a 30-something-year-old man, and so I feel like that we have a nice balance of perspectives here. He doesn't really care for musicals. Like, he'll watch one, he'll, like, fuck with one, but it's not, like, his favorite thing in the world, whereas for me, musicals are my favorite thing in the world, and so I think that we had a nice balance of perspectives here for our 7 out of 10, like our 7.5 out of 10 rating that we ultimately both went with, and so I do have some notes in here from Arnold, and we'll talk about Arnold's notes too. But off the top again, I just want to point out that I think that this movie has a lot of unfair bias against it. It does have problems, but, like, there are a culmination of issues going on, especially in, like, reviews and stuff, and I feel like we aren't talking about it enough, mostly, like, audience reviews, right? In terms of what people are saying, because you have the "this movie is destroying America" thing that people are saying, then you have the people that, like, hate Rachel Zegler and they're seething about it, and then you also have, on top of that, people that, like, I don't know, I guess Disney adults are really big Disney fans that, like, feel like Moana 2 is under attack right now, and they're commenting and, like, again, review bombing, like, oh, Moana 2 is so much worthwhile, like, more worthwhile than this movie, and, like, this is just a Disney ripoff, and everyone can have their own opinions, right? But I just don't think that these conclusions are in good faith. Like, after seeing both movies, especially, like, oh, Moana 2 is more worthwhile than this movie, and this is just ripping off Disney as if it has, like, nothing of substance. I just don't think that that's very fair. I don't understand how someone would come to that conclusion after, again, I have seen both movies. And just to compare the two for a moment, a musical, any musical, but especially like an animated musical, and I'll get into why, needs a strong thematic question in the opening, which is answered through the narrative. And it's answered through the script and the music and the visuals, like everything will contribute ultimately to this question. So when I look at Spellbound, right, there was a very clear thematic question that was presented at the beginning and it was answered at the end, and every single song served this thing. Whereas with Moana, you could obviously see that this was just a TV show that was strung together, and so there was no thematic question, like there was no point, it had nothing to say, and at the very end, the answer, or what should have answered the non-existent thematic question, was just a reprise of the ending song from the first movie, and so like, it doesn't make sense to me in terms of even saying like, oh, Moana 2's the better musical. I just question like, well, what is your evidence to suggest that? Because for me, the thematic question thing is like the entire basis, like for why we're telling the story. And so Moana just doesn't have one, so how can it be a better musical? I don't know. I'm just saying. Again, people can have their opinions, but I'm just saying, I would like you to explain your opinion with some detail, and I'm not getting the detail. I'm not getting the substance in terms of why people think this. And so even just comparing the two on that level, like Moana 2 was so nothing. Like there was nothing unique about it. It had nothing it wanted to say. There was no greater truth about the human experience in there, which is why we go to theater, which is why we go to musical theater, even animated musical theater, right? And so it was just like an inoffensive, turn your brain off, like throw your kids in front of the TV experience, whereas this actually had something it wanted to say. So despite the criticisms that I do have of it and like some of the road bumps and stuff, I can at least appreciate that in my opinion, it had something to say, it said it well and in a way that I found emotionally compelling, and it said it in a way that I actually remember, because I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything about Moana 2. And so I wanted to get that off the top as well. And of course, there is one more thing I want to talk about before we get into the chronological notes. And this is something that I want to talk about just because it gives me a slightly different perspective than I think some of you. Like for most of you, you will watch the movie and like move on in some way, right? Like maybe you'll listen to the songs or you might make fan art, but for us as performers, it's a little bit different in terms of when stuff like this gets released, because every new movie musical means that we have new material to sing for us, and that can be in our book forever. So it's a bit more of a permanent circumstance, and I think that that's an interesting thing that not a lot of people talk about. Even though I have my criticisms, which we will get to, what's really a breath of fresh air, at least for me, is that there are multiple songs in this movie that are within my voice type, that are age appropriate for kids, but could be sung by adults, right, and still make a lot of sense. And above all, these songs in terms of their subject matter are not like the typical cliches that we see. They're not about like boys, right? Because a lot of musical theater songs for women are about men. That's just the way it is. Like, I have been performing at least since I was like 10 or 11, right? And now I'm 25. I just turned 25 a couple days ago. And so it's actually quite shocking, like when I think about it, that I don't ever remember singing a song that is strictly about family, especially like for a soprano voice type. We are all suffering out here because like we are basically, you know, from the get-go, when we are like pushed into performing, if you have a soprano voice type, you are singing like Cosette and like Joanna, or like, oh, I can't remember the name of the character, but like If I Loved You, right? Like those are songs that as a 10-year-old, how are you actually going to understand? Like you don't know what love is. You've never been in love. Like why are we doing this, you know? And I understand why, now that I'm older, like why vocal teachers start off on these sorts of songs and things like that, because they're good soprano songs, but they aren't great acting songs for a child, right? The only thing I can think of is Glamorous Life. And the difference between that song and Spellbound, at least in my opinion, is I do like Glamorous Life, but my thing is that they let Ellie be rightfully angry, which is something that Disney seems to be afraid to do with their princesses lately. And so you have two things. You have appropriate subject matter, first of all, which is rare, but like I said, Glamorous Life exists, you know, that's fine. There are some out there, this just gives us more. But what I don't see in even the age-appropriate subject matter are age-appropriate emotions, because sopranos always have to be like the ingenue, like the innocent. They never get mad, they never get angry, right? Like they never have those negative emotions. Like they're usually the role for like the positivity and the hope and everything. And especially with the Disney princesses lately, they have been getting like more and more sanitized, I would say, in the last couple of years. And like this leads to an avoidance of conflict and like tricky emotions in these movies, and at least my opinion, like because the characters are just like too noble or too good or too loving. Like Anna loves her sister too much. Like, I guess movie Anna would never sing something like Life's Too Short, which is one of the cut songs from Frozen. But I want Life's Too Short. I want to see the sisters fighting and arguing with each other, because that's so much deeper in our grounded truth about the relationships with our families. And obviously you have Encanto and Maribel and all that stuff, but like Maribel is not a soprano, so there's nothing I can do about that. But all throughout Moana 2, I was sitting there and I was like, this would be so much more compelling in her I Want song if she was just a little angry, like a little bit angry about being shouldered with all of the responsibilities in the universe, like having to save the world again when she already did it the first time, but she never was. Like there's so much passivity, like so much resignation, and so that is never explored. And I think, again, the real reason is because of the branding. Like, oh, we want the princesses to be good role models, which means they can never have a negative emotion ever, and that leads into things like Elsa not being the villain of Frozen, Frozen anymore, and like that getting changed, and then Life's Too Short, like stuff like that getting cut. And I just think that that's a shame. So all of that to say, finally, I have a song that is a soprano song where I'm allowed to be angry, and it's not a breakup song about some guy. And then I also have a very nice Disney-esque I Want song that is about family and like family love instead of, again, just some guy. And I love the songs that are about just some guy. Like I said, I watched this with my boyfriend. We've been together for 5 years. I don't want you guys to get a wrong impression or something like that I like hate men or something, but I don't. I'm just saying that it gets tired. Like, I want to have different experiences as an actor, and it sucks that, like, until I'm, like, I don't know, 50, that I won't be able to play anything except for, like, the young ingenue who never, like, fights or says anything bad or, like, has a negative emotion or, like, shit, you know what I mean? And so that's just something that I think about all the time, is like, oh, I get the choice to be, like, the young ingenue, which I still like, and I like to play that role, and then eventually I will age out and I'll get to be an old woman who gets to have emotions. But by then, I'll be old. Like, you know what I mean? That doesn't help me in terms of my experience as an actor now to get typecast in such a pigeonholed type of role all the time. So anyway, this is where the review actually started, if anybody's curious. I do have notes, I promise. The animation was very pretty. Everything was bright and colorful, and it was so refreshing after staring at things like Wish for a long time, like I do. And also, even like how live action movies are nowadays, like they have this very desaturated vibe I don't like. And so this movie, colorful, beautiful, yay! Like, the bare minimum, oh my god. But no, seriously, I have to talk about some of this stuff because, you know, you think that going into an animated movie, it is going to be colorful. Like, you think that that's kind of the baseline, and then for Wish it wasn't. So, important to talk about. In the opening, like the big sweeping opening section, so we see Ellie and going on a griffin ride with her friends, and she's laughing, and we're having a little tee-hee, right? And so when the way it was before Leitmotif was there in the opening, like, I knew we were so back. I was like, Alan Menken, I missed you so much. Like, it's such a basic thing to do in terms of composition, like to weave in your leitmotifs into the score, but have movies been doing it? No, like, I watched this whole video. I'll probably link it down below, but I did post it on my community tab when it came out originally. Like, I saw a video about Frozen 2, and it seems like the composer for Frozen 2 wasn't allowed to create a musical motif out of, like, the songs that had been written for the movie. He had to invent his own motif, and that's weird. Like, I don't understand why they did that. Like, he wasn't allowed to use, like, Show Yourself or Into the Unknown. Like, he had to make his own, which is, like, fine. Like, I'm not saying that his are bad, but ideally you want to weave the score in with the songs, and he didn't seem to be allowed to do that. So, like, I don't know why, but movies aren't doing it lately, so that's more points in this movie's favor to me. So we start the movie with Ellie going on a griffin ride with her friends, and the castle calls her back with a flare gun because her parents are acting up, basically. And so it was interesting. I didn't expect for her parents to already be monsters at this point. I thought that, like, something was going to happen, like, I don't know, like, for example, oh, Ellie got lost in the woods and her parents went after her, and then they had an argument and they got turned into monsters. Like, I thought we were gonna do something like that. We were just, like, dropped right in to the parents being monsters. And this is where we reach our first song, and you guys know in my review videos I try to segment everything by the song that's happening, so this is our first song. And so we start with the advisors calling back Ellie because her parents are out of control. She's the only character that can seem to control them, and we get like almost Barbie Princess and the Pauper, like Annalise-ish free type song, but with some more realistic frustrations, I would say. And so you have that sort of contrast with the responsibilities of a princess and how her life currently is now versus the dreams of her getting her parents back. And so I do have like one or two nitpicks about this. But I do think it was a good opening number to start the movie, because opening numbers should put the thesis of the show forward. And of course, it also needs to give us the exposition while doing it. And so I think that this song showcased very well, like, the toll that this is taking on Ellie and how she is struggling and how she's trying to put on this, like, mask of positivity. The advisors comment on this as well. And so you can see that she's really bottling up her negativity. And then we have that nice contrast between, like, what she wishes that her life would be and also, like, oh, well, you think think that your parents are bossy. Like, my parents are literally monsters, and I thought that was very funny. And so I feel like that this established the theme of this movie quite well, because it's like, how are we coping with the changes of life? Like, how do we shoulder all of these responsibilities? Or why do we have to? Like, how do we get through this? How do we cope? Why should we cope? Like, should we just like toss everything away and like move on, or can we repair things? Like, it's not necessarily as obvious as a Disney movie would be in terms of like, who is the monster and who is the man, and then at the end of Huntback, it's what makes a monster and what makes a man, right? Or like, who could ever learn to love a beast, and then we immediately cut to Belle, right? Like, it's not that obvious, but I think that it makes sense. It made sense to me. I instantly understood where we were here, and the answer to those questions, of course, are slowly being revealed throughout the movie. And all of the characters in the song, the other interesting thing is that you have Ellian, but it's not just her, you also have the advisor singing, and so you understand like different characters want to move on for different reasons. And it's all a matter of how. Like, how do we do that? And I think the movie's ultimately exploring like, how do we do that? What does that mean? And so that's why I think it was so strong. And I was also immediately endeared to Ellian, like not just because of the song, but just thinking about like, oh my God, it's been a whole year of this. Like, imagining that in of itself is so exhausting, and we do see that in the visuals as well, but I just like immediately felt that. Like, I think that that's sort of the benefit of dropping us in when it's already a year into this situation, because you're like, oh my God, like if this is just one day, you imagine that one day compiled into like an entire year, and that's crazy. And this is subjective, right? Like, in terms of whether or not you found Ellian relatable. I saw some people say that they didn't, and that's a subjective part. What I will argue is that the foundation to make that connection is there. Whether or not people will make that connection on their end is a different thing, but like, you can't really force that as a writer, you know what I mean? Like, you can do your best to lay the foundation to have your audience connect with the character, but ultimately it's up to them. So it's just gonna depend on who you are. But I think that at least what I would say is that I feel like that the foundation was laid. Like, I see it there. I felt it. I really liked how they highlight that she feels like she needs to shoulder all of this and stay positive, because otherwise everything else will fall apart. This is, again, something that I kind of wanted from Moana, like that sort of frustration. Like, she's like, well, I have to do it because nobody else is gonna do it. And so she feels obligated because there's an obligation to family, of course, and that she loves them. She wants to do it for them so that one day, hopefully, her parents can get better. If she's able to handle everything and keep everything together in the meantime, it'll be a hardship now, but then in the future, like, she'll be grateful that she had done it. And I just realized that, like, this is almost like an opposite Life After Happily Ever After vibe, like from the Tangled series. Like, it's kind of giving me that, just like in terms of how she sings about like her royal duties. Rapunzel sings about that, but obviously, like, this is in the inverse way, where we have a conflict. Like, the conflict in that song for Rapunzel is like, this should be my happy ending, but it's not. The conflict here is like, this is definitely not my happy ending. So it's almost like opposite ends of the same sort of song. If I had to give feedback though, I think that even though this number is like fine, alternatively, it may have been a good idea to show Ellian aging through the year, like, versus the exposition about it, like, kind of like Frozen. I think that it works because we still understand, like, all the things that are happening in the present have been happening to her every single day for the last year, so that's fine, right? But I think that it may have more of a build pacing-wise, because we could have had, instead of like Ellian, she kind of weirdly breaks the fourth wall and is like, hi, this is my life, welcome, like, kind of like, you know, a Disney Channel movie, you know, which is a little bit weird. For a musical, I think that, well, not for a musical, on stage that happens quite a lot in things like Beetlejuice, but usually it's like character dependent, as opposed to, hello, audience, this is my life now. I think that what they could have considered was having like Ellian at the beginning of the year, and like she's writing this letter, right, to the sun and moon people about like how the last year has been, like, to the mages. And so she's like, this happened and this happened and this happened and I'm doing this, this, and this, right? And like, these are my responsibilities and I would like things to be normal again. Signed, Ellian, right? And like, we send it off. So that way, if it was framed as a letter, like, the kind of fourth wall break thing wouldn't need to happen and it would make sense. I'm not like eager to change this song by any means. Like with Wish songs and Moana songs, like, I am eager, I am ready. I'm like, let me me rewrite this shit. With this one, not so much, because I think that this version still works. It's just something for you guys to think about, of course, because like part of the purpose of this channel, at least to me, isn't just reviewing things, but like you want to tell a story, even if it's just like a fan fiction or something like that. Writing advice, even outside of a musical context, I personally would have done it to have her be in the process of sending the letter, so we already have the seed planted that she's like asking the sun and moon mage people for help. Because that's something else with a number like this, like you wonder like, okay, well, why hasn't she tried to get help? They address that in the script, but in terms of like in a song, I think that that would have been a really nice like oomph point if she's like, I have been looking for the solution for all this time and I just found these two people that are finally gonna help. And then that sets up the stakes of the movie a lot better. Because this set up the theme, but it like almost didn't perfectly set up the plot, if that makes sense. Like it was much more of a character song with the exposition of what's happened in the past, but I didn't really get that like, and now I'm going to write a letter to the sun and moon people. Like that happened in the script afterwards. Now it's time to move on to the advisors song. And so the advisors want to prop up Ellian as the leader, and I really liked this subplot just because it's something a little different. Like usually we have like, yeah, let's kill the king, right? And it's important to have villains operate at narrative extremes, right? But usually in a fairy tale, the narrative extreme has something to do with good and evil. So you have these very like black and white characters. You know, like you have Scar trying to kill Mufasa. Like that's perfectly fine for something like The Lion King, because especially for fairy tales, that sort of thing plays into it, right? But with this movie, because the extremes are more on like an emotional end versus a good and evil, I think that them being like, step in a new direction, screw the king and queen, kinda, like, let's just get rid of them, can we finally move on? Like, they complain about a bunch of things, like the castle's always broken, right? Their clothes, like the lavish life that I guess they used to have as advisors is gone, right? And so they're like, fuck this, can we just all move on? And so you have the opposite of like, let's just pretend that this never happened, and then you have Ellian on the other side of the extreme, which is like, I want to go back to the way things were before. But the truth is like in the middle ground, right? Like, in terms of where the movie's themes are going. So I think that like this advisor choice in terms of their motivations was actually quite smart, and obviously like a murder plot would be found out. Like just do the logical thing, which is to make Ellian take over things, and like because she's coming of age, right? She can be crowned, and they can again whisk the parents off into wherever, right? They can stop pretending, because they've been pretending, so this comes back later. They have been pretending for an entire year that the queen and king are still alive, but they're just busy, which is hilarious. But now they see this as a solution that they can finally stop lying. They can just tell the kingdom that the king and queen are dead, even though they're not. They can, you know, put the monsters in the stables, whatever, and then Ellian can take over. And this is where we get into their weird little tango song, okay? And so I think in terms of a villain song, this was not supposed to be an exposition song, since it's pretty straightforward, like in the text, what they want to do. I think that it was supposed to be more of a character song, like an I am song, versus an I want song. But I think that what really held this song back for me was the talk singing. Like there was a lot of talk singing, and I can't quite figure out why this happened, because the two people that are playing the advisors, one is Jennifer Lewis, and she was the voice for Mama Odie in The Princess and the Frog, and obviously she's done Broadway, so like I know she's a good singer. And the guy that's playing Bolinar, whose name I apparently didn't write down, he was also on Broadway. He's a bit older now. He's almost like 80 years old, so maybe it's just like age, but I'm very like, how did this happen? Because I know that they're good singers, it's just that their character voices aren't great for like this particular style of song and like what this song needs to be. Especially like for Bolinar, I think that he was very attached to his character voice, and that just held back the singing. Like it's very like playing with the big boys now, you know, in that regard, where it's like, oh, this song is fun, but their character voices, I don't want to say they're annoying, but like they're character voices, right? They're meant to be listened to as part of the movie, which is very different than like listening to them after the movie is over and wanting to turn on the villain song, right? So it's just like, this song is fun. I like the song, but like I'm waiting for Anna Pantsu to do a cover of it with somebody. Their ranges just seem to be a little strained here for some reason, like especially especially for, again, the male advisor, Bolinar. I do think, too, what saved this song for me was Ellian coming back, because Ellian gets to have a little part of this song here. And I think what was really great about this is that you see her ideals and motivations, which are very, like, different compared to the villains, but they're singing under that unified theme, which is what we want for a duet. We want all the characters to be unified under the umbrella of a theme, which is to step in a new direction. But the villains have a different idea of what that means compared to Ellian, and that is good. And this is where, though, we get into, like, second issue. Because second issue, what was my first issue? I think my first issue was Bolinar, right? Yeah, so I think issue 1 is technically Bolinar. The second issue was just pacing in general, but we'll get back to Bolinar in a little, because the real issue with him, it's not here yet. So, second issue is that the pacing gets a little bit slow here, and you've probably seen other YouTube reviewers talk about this, in terms of, like, the sun and moon mages coming to answer Ellian's message at her birthday. Now, personally, because I liked Ellian in the story, I was still interested, but I was the first one to, like, kind of say to my boyfriend, I was like, this is a little bit slow. Like, do you agree? You know, like, this is, like, slightly slow, and we both agreed on that. I was the first one to say it. It's just because, like, so we have a birthday party, right? And the mages come to, like, reveal how to break the spell. But then they get chased into the woods by the parents, and then a bunch of other stuff happens in between her actually getting into the woods. And so it just feels like a little bit of, like, too much back and forth, because they came all this way only for, like, Ellian to have to, like, go follow them, but she also doesn't go follow them right away. And so I feel like in terms of a script thing, this could have been cleaned up a little. But at the same time, the reason why I feel a little generous about this is because this is not an issue that is exclusive to this movie, especially with things like Netflix. Like, you will hear about, there's, like, some YouTube videos about this, how, like, internally at Netflix, they are thinking to themselves, we need to make this longer, like, we need to make this more second screen, like, we need to, you know, especially with, like, documentaries, for example, where they sort of, like, draw things out when the answer, you know, could have been in the first episode, and it's just a whole lot of nothing, right? Like, it's not necessarily as bad as some of those other things that people have talked about, but I do know, like, internally at Netflix, like, that is a thing that like, can we keep people on the platform for longer? And so I'm willing to have, like, a little bit of, like, forgiveness about that, because that's happening to so many things nowadays, like, just, like, general corporate meddling. So yeah, I don't know how necessary it was for the mage sun and moon guys to come all the way here, get interrupted when they're about to reveal how to break the spell, leave as soon as the parents start chasing them, and then have a big section before Ellian goes in the woods to, like, find out, like, what the answer was. Like, I do like, in terms of the allegory that this movie is supposed to be, that Ellian finally found help for her parents, and her parents, like, literally sabotaged it and chased the help away. But I feel like that this is one of the things that I would want to restructure in this movie. So here's what I was thinking, okay? This is, like, my little rewrite, okay? So Ellian has a group of friends that doesn't come back until the end. So what I would have done is that Ellian's friends try to throw her a surprise party, right? And the entire kingdom during the surprise party finds out that the parents are monsters. Like, basically, they throw a party, maybe in the castle, maybe somewhere else for her, whatever, but Ellian, because she's not there to control her parents because she's celebrating her birthday, the parents get out, and then everyone finds out that they are monsters. And that's when you have the general freaking out. Because that's what's coming up next, is that the parents escape because Ellian gave them both a piece of birthday cake in, like, separate cages, and then the next morning they, like, basically run out into the kingdom, and everyone finds out it's the king and queen that are transformed. So instead of the sun and moon guys, like, coming right away, what I would have done is I would have had the birthday party, like, little scene section, but then have the entire kingdom find out in that section, and then Ellian go into the woods to find help, but not know the sun and moon people already. Do you know what I mean? Like, she wouldn't know the mages. She would just go into the woods looking for help. And so then from there, right after the birthday party, after the general is like, we need to do something about this, because she suggests, like, sending her parents out in the middle of a field, basically. Like, from there, we could have Ellian being like, no, I don't want to give up on my parents. And then she can just sneak them out manually without the magic wand that the sun and moon mages give her. And so she could go into the forest to look for help, and then she just comes across the sun and moon wizard creatures, right? And so I think that that would be a little bit more organized compared to what happened, which was birthday party, next day right? Like, next day, General finds out, and then Ellian going to the Sun and Moon Mages again, so we would have a little bit less back and forth. I hope that makes sense to you guys that, like, haven't seen the movie yet, but obviously this is a spoiler review, so the intention was for you guys to see the movie so we can talk about it, obviously. So yeah, so that's the only place where I feel like that the pacing issues, we could have had a bit of a more streamlined situation where we could have had the birthday party, had the entire kingdom find out, and then, like, just axe the thing of, like, Ellian knowing that the Sun and Moon Mages exist already. Just have her doing, like, I'm going into the woods to find help, like, I'm going into the magic woods, that's fine. But despite my rewrites, the Sun and Moon Mages are here, so we have to talk about them, okay? So they come in like a giant frog that's, like, I guess kind of a car, and they give him 5 stars. And, like, that was cute because it's, like, actual physical stars, and there's also, like, a car freshener inside of the frog, and, like, it's cute. And I usually find those sorts of jokes funny, but I don't love that they're, like, background jokes with modern references. Do you guys know what I mean? And so I appreciate the kind of, like, oh, this joke is, like, kind of clearly for the adults, like the car freshener thing in the background, like, most kids won't notice that. But I'm like, we had a perfectly good fantasy world. But of course the guy that worked on Shrek needed to put, like, Shrekisms in here, right? Like, in a key fob, because the magic wand that I talked about earlier that the Sun and Moon Mage give Ellian is a key fob, like a car key sort of situation. And so of course, like, the Shrek guy needs to put an Uber reference and a key fob magic wand and, like, an air freshener in here. Like, I just don't love that, because at least Shrek fully committed to going full Shrek, you know what I mean? But this movie seems like a fantasy movie until these weird moments happen, and so I do wish that they had just picked Elaine. It's not that bad as in, like, oh my god, it feels like 2 different people wrote this movie. It's definitely still cohesive, and like I said, even despite my criticisms, I do want to impart on you guys that I did enjoy it. However, I didn't like that. I didn't like the Shrek stuff. But anyway, so the Sun and Moon Mages are definitely like old married couple energy, and my boyfriend actually clocked this first before I did, even though I'm the queer one. For some reason, he noticed it before I did. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I just thought, like, oh, it's that sort of, like, Timon and Pumbaa dynamic. Like, I didn't really give it any more thought. Like, yeah, they're bickering like an old married couple, but I was just like, whoosh, like, they're almost like buddy cops. It's just magic. So I didn't really, like, again, whoosh, right? But I like their dynamic. Like, they bicker with each other, but the entire point is that they compromise, and this serves as a parallel to Ellian's parents, right? Because they actually, as a couple, I guess, again, the Sun and Moon Mage guys, like, they resolve their issues, and they're bickering with compromise, and so that serves as a nice little parallel to the other relationship in the movie, being Ellian's parents. Now, obviously, because of course people are, because people can't be normal about anything, of course people are review bombing this as like, oh, they're shoving gay people down our throats, and I'm like, they're not even people. What the fuck are you talking about? I know I said I wouldn't talk a lot about the reviews, but yeah, I just needed to get that off my chest for a minute, because I'm like, what do you mean? They're not even human. They're just like 2 little guys. What are you talking about? Like, complaining about, like, gay-coded characters in the movie is, like, stupid in the first place, because the stuff from your childhood has gay-coded characters, like, obviously, Ursula, right? A huge one. Ursula, Scar, like, the villains you love are gay-coded. These movies are made by queer people, like, The Little Mermaid has tons of the queer experience in it, and so I look at these reviews sometimes, and it's like, this is gonna be so off topic, I'm sorry, but, like, so new leaks about, like, the new protagonist for the Avatar TV show that's coming out, I guess after Korra. I never watched Korra, so I'm not sure. Like, leaks are coming out, and people are complaining, like, oh, like, they made her, like, disabled for, like, the woke points or whatever, and I'm like, do you guys remember that in the first show, there was a blind disabled character? Like, what are we doing here? It's like one of those things like, oh, if Avatar came out today, like, YouTubers that are grifting would be mad about it, and they definitely would, which is crazy. It's just crazy to me, because I see these things and I'm like, we had Timon and Pumbaa when I was a kid. Like, if we had Timon dressing in drag and doing the hula, and nobody said anything, but now everything is like, oh, right, like the YouTuber grifters must make money about it, so everything's, oh, go woke, go broke, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, obviously these people are just, like, bigoted, like, that's their motivation. There is nothing for me to understand. That's just it. But I wanted to talk about that because I thought it was just funny, because thinking back on the movie, I'm like, they're not human, dude. You guys need other things to be mad about. Oh my god. But anyway, So, even though I have problems with the pacing here, the parents needing separate cages for, like, the birthday cake, like, that was a nice little, again, fantasy, like, representation of, like, the divorced parents needing separate birthday parties, like, sort of thing, or, like, just, like, separate events or needing to keep your parents separated for events. And so I thought that that was really good. And this brings us to the way it was before. Oh, also, the little dudes have a song here. That's why I made this their own section, but they barely get through it because they get chased away. So it's like, it's kind of like a tease of a song, but it's like, it's not really that crazy. It's like, if anything, it's just like a magic spell song where it's like, and here's the magic spell, but then it gets cut off like after a minute. I don't even think it's like over 50 seconds. Anyway, so that brings us to the way it was before. And so my theory about the placement was wrong, but my theory about the emotions were right. So luckily my Spellbound video did not age poorly. It is good. The environmental storytelling was really, really good. It really enhances what the music was going for. Like, you see like the water droplets on the piano and the piano's destroyed. One day we'll talk about it in a song analysis, but I really liked all the visuals here. I thought that was really well done. Again, like I said, people can have their own opinions, but I'm just genuinely surprised that people are saying that the music here is worse than Wish. Like, I just don't. Again, can you provide me some evidence towards your conclusions? Like, obviously things can be as simple as, I enjoyed this and I didn't like this, but I need some reason. Like, do you have a deeper reason beyond the way that you feel? Because at least for me, I can explain why beyond, oh, I just liked it, right? For me, it emotionally resonated with me. It's about different subject matter than we usually get to see in these movies. It's in my range, and again, it's not that like kind of cliche song lamenting about love and men and like all that stuff. And those songs have their place, but part of my appreciation, other than the emotional part, and just like I think the lyrics were well written, I thought that the composition was very well done, like Alan Menken and Glenn Slater, to me, I'm like, they're so back, right? Like, but even like just how the song emotionally connected to me, even aside, it's just like unique as a musical compared to like, I don't know, like just another like animated musical movie. Like, there's something actually unique in here compared to Moana, where even if the Moana I Want song was good, and I don't think that it was very good personally, I'm saying in the Moana 2, even if the Moana 2 I Want song like was good, it would still just be like, in terms of the emotional beats, what the first movie did, but like again, right? And so this has like kind of, you know, this has different emotional beats unlike other movies that I've seen and that I've watched. And that's, again, something that I mentioned at the beginning, but I'd like to say again, even for something imperfect like Spellbound is, that's gonna get more points to me than something like Wish, because you are getting songs that we don't typically like get to have as performers, right? Like, if anything, like if this movie is good for anything, it was creating songs that we don't typically get to sing as performers, that I've never even gotten to sing, right? I couldn't even think of one, as I said at the beginning. And so something special about musicals compared to like a movie or like a live action TV show is that the songs exist outside of their original context. And so that's something that continues to breathe life into the story after it's over. And so again, like, even though I have problems with stuff like that I've talked about already, like the pacing and things like that, I feel like that not enough reviewers talk about the impact of the music after the music has been heard in the movie, because obviously they're focused on doing a movie review, right? But in terms of a musical, and just me personally thinking about the impact that this would have had on me as a kid, a very positive impact of being able to perform something that is, again, age appropriate and emotional and like relatable, that like would have meant a lot to me. And so I can see that impact in how, you know, a bunch of kids going forward are gonna really like find themselves in this song, and how important that is even for kids that aren't performers, right? And so I really enjoyed this, and I do think like it is still well written, you know what I mean? Because sometimes it's like, oh, this song's not very, like, this song isn't very good, but it hit a unique emotional beat, so it passes. But like, this song has both. To me, I think it is a very well written song in terms of my perspective of songwriting, and it hits on the emotional beats. So I don't want you guys to think I'm just giving it a pass because it's different. I think it's good and it's different. different at the same time. And seeing the song as the I Want song, it did make more sense to me in terms of what I theorized, or I should say compared to what I theorized about in the Spellbound video, because now you see that, like, she is deciding whether or not she wants to go on the adventure and save her parents. And so we're focused on the emotional decision that she's making. She could give up on them like everyone is telling her, or she could fight for her future with them. And I feel like that conflict is shown very clearly here in the music and the lyrics and like the storyboarding. Like, you can see and hear the darkness, and then you can see and hear the light that's with Ellian herself. And this is something that I talked about in the Spellbound video, so I'm glad I was right about that. So even though I have my complaints about the pacing of these scenes, the parents getting out into the kingdom is wild. Like, it was kind of funny, right? Because I wrote, like, imagine you're just, like, having your day, you know, like, you're just tending your sheep or whatever normal thing that you're doing, and, like, this happens. Like, I thought that it was funny, but in that, like, oh my god, no, like, that sort of way where we were like, oh, good lord. But it was just hilarious to see, like, the kingdom reacting. I also really like the general lady, and I'm like, close enough. Welcome back, Cassandra from Tangled. Like, in terms of the archetype, they don't really look anything alike at all. I really like the conflict here with, like, the advisors, the general, the subjects of the kingdom, and then all of that versus Ellian. Like, it doesn't feel like a cliche miscommunication trope, because it's not even about, like, that the parents are monsters. Is that they lied. The advisors lied for an entire year about it. Like, no wonder people are so mad you're elected officials. Or I guess they may not be elected if they're royal advisors, they were hand chosen, but whatever. Like, your officials have been lying to you this entire time, right? And possibly compromising your safety. So I like that it's not like a mwahaha evil. It's extreme and it's drastic in terms of what the general suggests to kind of rectify the situation. But it is not that, like, I don't know, it's not that cliche, let's kill them sort of thing. Like, the general lady's completely reasonable with her fear, but she wants to pick the highest extreme, and that contrasts to Elliot in a similar way to, like, how the advisors contrast her. And again, the truth is somewhere in the middle. We will get there. I wrote another note here that even though I really hated the magic wand key fob thing, that I do like how the magic carriage was created out of these, like, ordinary objects and how the magic reacts to Ellian, because before we get into our next song here, basically what happens is that Ellian's like, no, and she decides to take her parents out of their cages and then, like, bring them into the woods to get help. And so their cages sort of make like a Cinderella-like carriage, and then the general is chasing after them. Because it's not even, again, a let's kill them. It's like they're genuinely worried for Ellian's safety and the fact that, like, they think that her parents could hurt her because they are monsters. And so I really like that. Again, the adults in this movie, they may be, like, a little, like, selfish, like, in terms of the advisor and the general, but ultimately it's not out of selfishness that they're doing all these things. It's out of a general concern for her safety, but they're blinded by their own desires to, like, just move on and put this in the past, that they kind of give up on their own king and queen. But, okay, so this is where I'm getting into my big complaint about this movie, and, like, people have talked about the pacing, right? I've seen it in almost every video. People did not talk about this enough for my liking, because I think that this is the biggest problem with the movie. And so when I said my first issue is Bolinar earlier, and the second issue was the pacing, and I didn't really explain because we hadn't gotten there yet. So Bolinar body swaps with Fink, and Fink is Ellian's little, like, creature, like her little Pascal, I guess, right? And so that's one of the two royal advisors, right? And so it's the male royal advisor, who I said earlier is doing a character voice. We'll talk about it, but he gets another song. And I'm like, you gave him another song, and I don't want to insult the actor, but you gave him another song when he's doing this character voice, and he needs to sing again. Like, he has not only one song, but now he has two. Like, I'm sure he could do well in any other circumstance, but why did you do this? Like, why did you, to me personally, why didn't you pick him? Like, at least, you know, the female advisor, I would have been like, yeah, sure, let's go for it, because her voice was a little bit better. But, like, his voice is not. His character voice, again, I have to stress. So I'm like, Bolinar, why? Why did they put him back here? Especially because he needs to have another song now and he can't sing, like, in this character voice. He cannot sing in this particular voice. So I think what happened here is that they wanted to have Fink talk so that Ellian wasn't all by herself because her parents need to learn how to talk again. And like, you know, obviously that goes into the themes of the movie. Like they literally need to learn how to communicate with each other. And so I understand kind of why they did it, because this is just like every single movie now has an annoying sidekick character, right? But like he is a nuisance to my enjoyment of this movie. And I kind of did like that, like Bolinar is selfish and he does continue to sabotage and he tries to lead like the general and Nazira to them, and like he does all these things to cause conflict. And then he has this like slow change of heart to defend Ellian and realize she was right and they gave up on the king and queen too easily. But like there's a couple things other than his voice just being like, again, his character voice being annoying when he has to sing again. So in terms of taking this allegory into the real world, who is Bolinar in this situation? Because your parents are parents and the child is the child caught in between the divorce. Who are you, random man? Like, this would be like if a family friend was trying to meddle in your parents' divorce. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the lesson that's directed at him is a little bit like, sir, like, this is a Wendy's. Like, what are you doing here? Who are you supposed to be? I guess technically, like, you know what I mean? Like, during a divorce, like, sure, family members may get involved and, like, stick their nose in where they don't belong, but, like, Bolinar's character arc is not necessarily conducive to the greater metaphor of this movie to me, and so I'm like, why are you here? What are you supposed to represent? Like, the doubt of what? Because ultimately, the parents do still get a divorce. It's the lesson of the movie is them learning how to co-parent. And so, like, who are you in this situation that you're doubting that they could ever co-parent and that Elliot is just better off by herself? Like, surely, like, you can't be a family member, right? I don't know. Like, I don't know what he's supposed to, like, represent. And of course, we have that same annoying sidekick voice syndrome, like the gargoyles in Hunchback and, like, Phil in Hercules and, like, even Mushu, except luckily Mushu doesn't sing, right? And so, like, other Disney movies do this, right? So I can't necessarily, like, clock this movie for doing it because every movie does it now. It's to appeal to children, but it still bothers me anyway. And so here's how I would try to fix this in a constructive way. I would have axed the royal advisors and instead have, like, Ellian's brother be a contrasting character for Ellian's journey, and that would have made more sense to me. Like, I would have gone with, oh, this is the older brother character who is, like, I don't know, kind of rebellious, and, like, he's not the heir. Like, even though he's older, like, maybe in this kingdom it's the women who take the throne, so, like, he's off the hook, and he's kind of like Fiyero, like, you know, like, from Wicked, and he has that sort of personality. And so you can have the brother be selfish, and the brother be cynical, and the brother be like, our parents are monsters, and there's no way to reverse it, they're never coming back, you should just be queen so we can go back to our old, you know, way of life, right? Like, our fancy parties and our clothes and whatever. Like, you could have had sort of like a fuckboy brother, right? That only wants Ellian to be in power so he can have his lavish lifestyle again, and then have him have the change of heart instead of Bolinar, who I'm like, it's giving the, like, Bud thinks he's on the team meme, you know what I mean? Like, what they could have done is have a brother character to highlight the differences between how kids cope. Like, Ellian is very positive, like, to the point of toxic positivity, and I would have had her brother be like, again, Fiyero, and he's partying, and he's kind of like that Naveen character archetype, but he has a change of heart, and you see that that's just all a front for him not wanting to, like, feel his emotions or whatever, and then you can have him be vulnerable later on in the movie when the parents start to come back. So, for now, we are going to move on from my Bolinar hate, but don't worry, we're not done yet, because he still has another song, and that's where I was like, oh god. And I was talking to Arnold, and I was like, Arnold, why did they do this? Why did they make this man sing? Like, we both agreed that, like, when the movie hits, it really hits, but it really hits when they're focusing on Ellian and her parents, as opposed to, like, the annoying side characters, right? So Elian goes into the woods to find the mages, and there's a really funny joke in here where she's like, okay, well, if you can't help me, like, do you know someone else, like a wizard, a sorcerer, like a pixie? And they're like, do you think we all know each other? And I was like, that was funny. That's the type of humor I want, like, not the slime humor and, like, the vomit and the burping and the Uber references, right? Like, that's the type of humor I appreciate. That was fucking funny. But yeah, so this is where we find out that only the parents can break the spell, according to my notes, which is what I thought. And we also get another song here from the gay-coded sun and moon couple. And I also wrote in my notes, again, Arnold clocked that they were gay first, not me. But they get like a couple song here. And this song almost falls into playing with the big boys territory because one of the blue guys has like a really strong, I don't know if that's his real accent, I don't think it is. One of the blue guys has a very strong accent in a character voice, and then the other blue guy has a very like nice like singing voice. So I think the nice singing voice one really rescued things. The other thing is it just kind of reminded me of like the Addams Family for some reason, like the Addams Family musical. And so, you know, it was more of a comedy song, so I feel like it got away with it, and visually it's a fun sequence. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and it also sets up a few important like alien-related emotional beats. And so I think that this song is better than the Villain Tango, because here's my opinion, okay? You can't have the villains have the annoying voice, all right? I know that it happens. I'm thinking about the guy from Anastasia and Dark of the Night. When I listen to Dark of the Night, I'm always listening to, like, a girl cover it. Like, I never listen to the original. Like, you can have the sidekicks, fine. You can have, like, You're a Yago, and like, sure, Yago gets one song in the second Jafar movie. Like, you can have that sort of thing, that's okay. But when you start to have the villains have that sort of character voice and it's just too much, it distracts from like their villainy, right? And so in this song, where it's supposed to be, we are the helpful like side characters who are singing, and one of us has like a kind of like funny character accent, like that's okay. Because your purpose is different than the purpose of the villain song. So that's why I think in terms of like comparing the two, this song justifies itself and like how it is a little bit more than the Villain Tango. I think that what's also really interesting here is that they explain that the parents became monsters because they lost their light, like the most important part of themselves is gone. And I wrote in my notes that I saw that and thought, how can people say that Wish is better than this movie when this movie actually has the stakes that Wish should have had? Like, imagine if Magnifico, I know taking the wishes is different, but imagine like when he learns to start crushing the wishes, that the people started to turn into monsters or something, and he had this giant monster army. Like, that would have made Wish so much higher stakes. That would have been fucking cool, right? Like, you could have had the monsters be based around people's wishes, and so, like, say the girl that wanted to be, like, a seamstress, you could have her be, like, that giant, you know, spinning wheel monster from Kingdom Hearts. Like, that sort of stuff is fun. But, like, anyway, I want to get back to this movie, but like everything that this movie did, I was kind of like, Wish, question mark? Because there's a line, and I talked about this in my Spellbound like essay that I made as like the prelude to a song analysis on The Way It Was Before, that there's a line in The Way It Was Before that is like kind of suspicious, and I wonder if Alan Menken and Glenn Slater knew about Wish and that they were like kind of sneaking something in there about it. Like, I don't know how, I can't say how they feel about it, but if I were them, I would be pretty salty that Julia Michaels got to write the movie and they didn't, right? And so I just see things and I'm like, did somebody know about Wish when this movie was getting made? And this is very bluntly where we get into the emotional beats with Elian, like in terms of the little blue guys, they say, everyone has dark feelings, it's how you deal with them that counts. And I wrote, Elian says she doesn't have any darkness, and so I can see a force positivity thing happening with her, which was hinted at the beginning, so this is like what I predicted as I was taking notes, and obviously I was correct. So it's too bad that she has to give the magical key fob back, though. I would have liked to see them use that more. So that's just too bad that like she returns it, because that means like most of the magic is gone from like this point in the movie. But I kind of get it in terms of where we're going, because it would make some of the challenges a little too easy if she had it. But this is why I think restructuring things would have made a little bit more sense, because if you had the birthday party and then you had her just escape naturally and make a makeshift carriage without magic, like going into the woods to meet the sun and moon mage, you would have never needed to introduce them giving her magic. Like, the only reason why they seem to show up is to have, again, the parents chase them out as like part of the greater allegory for what the musical is trying to be. And then also, so she has the key fob, so she can use the key fob to escape with her parents and make the magical bippity boppity boo type like pumpkin carriage, but like out of their cages. See, so in that regard, I know why they did it, but if it was more how I suggested the scenes be laid out, we wouldn't need to have like magic at all, so she wouldn't need to give it back. She just could have used her own wits to like make a carriage herself. Like, I don't know, like magic didn't seem to be too relevant if she just snuck out with them in the middle of the night. I know there is something that happens when she's escaping. The general is like chasing them and they're about to go through a waterfall, and so the magic parts the waterfall for her, but I'm like, you could just have that magic be part of the world. She doesn't necessarily need to do that. So in terms of like cleaning stuff up, maybe I wouldn't have had the magic like ever like be something that she had. So now we're kind of far away from our next song, and so this is just like, we went through the woods. And so back to Bolinar. So Bolinar is like kind of important, I guess, because his selfish ass keeps trying to call the guards and keeps trying to like alert them to like their location before Elena can turn Elian, sorry. I said her name like 400 different ways in that video essay. Elian can turn her parents back. So again, what I'm saying is that a cynical older brother could have really sold this in terms of they aren't our parents anymore, like versus Bolinar saying they aren't your parents anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit different. So I think that, especially for these scenes, I would have liked the brother character to actually be in here. And so this is where we actually start delivering in terms of like, we are out of suspicious pacing land, and this is where I was really like, oh yes, this is what I want. This is fantasy inside out. Like, now we're getting into the more like using this world to make an emotional point. And so they go through this cave where like positive noises are these like little like, I don't know, they almost look like blood cells, like floating white blood cells, but they're blue. And then we get like angry noises, or like, yeah, like noise with malicious intent, or like angry, and they're like these kind of lightning bolt beam sort of thing. And this may have been on the nose, but I will remind you that I am planning on, or have already released, a video with people's reviews where they like literally did not understand what this movie was about. Like, does the audience need to be spoon-fed? Like, yeah, apparently they do. Apparently they do, because when you look at the reviews, like, you see like a fundamental misunderstanding, even though it was so on the nose, about that this was all about like them slowly learning how to co-parent. Like, that's what they're doing in this cave, right? And so it's just crazy. And so like, again, you know, that question comes up all the time, like, oh, well, you know, I don't like that the writers spoon-fed this to us. Well, you know why? It's because America has a media literacy problem and a regular literacy problem. That's probably why. Like, you have people that are saying, oh, like, Elian's parents are selfish and like all of that stuff, and like, oh, we're normalizing divorce and everything. Like, clearly being hit over the head with the fact that the parents are arguing at first, but then they see how it's impacting Elian, and so they make their like angry noises into positive noises to chase the darkness away and rescue her. Like, that as a, you know, a greater like metaphor, whatever, for co-parenting, and that conveying how they are slowly learning how to co-parent. Like, none of that wasn't enough, because you still have people say that the parents were selfish and that they didn't try and like they didn't like work on their marriage or whatever. They worked on their co-parenting. That's what we're doing here. That's what the entire movie is about. It's about them slowly learning how to co-parent. And so, was it on the nose? I guess. I still liked it, and I think even if it was on the nose, people need it, apparently, because even it being on the nose, like, just was not enough. Oh, I also wrote a note here. I feel like that if people have complaints about the pacing beyond this point, the issue may come from thinking that this was going to be an action-adventure movie, when really it's like fantasy inside out. You know what I mean? Because I found the emotional journey that they were trying to show very interesting. Like, this magical world is a manifestation of their divorce, basically. Like, every situation that they go through is showing how it's impacting Elian, and like giving them an opportunity to learn how to co-parent, and that's what these scenes are really for. Like, in this case with the magical magical cave, it was to show how the parents arguing can literally like hurt the child. And I thought that was more unique compared to like a standard action adventure movie. And again, that's not to say that people's criticisms are invalid, but I knew what to expect. And I think that that's part of the reason why I don't necessarily share them. Like if you went into this and you were expecting something like Tangled, where they specifically marketed Tangled to be like an action adventure movie, especially to kind of get like that, you know, male demographic, like boy demographic, if you want to call it that, to get like that demographic in where there was like action and adventure and stuff like that. Like I could see why you would think that this is not very exciting. My thing is like, I didn't need it to be exciting because I thought that it was interesting in terms of like the emotional beat. Arnold even like turned to me like in Discord, because we're on Discord. He's not visiting yet until Saturday. But he turned to me a couple times and he was like, I have never seen a movie like do something like this before. And I don't know, maybe you have like the film the savant that you are or whatever, but that's why to me I was like, this is more interesting than like an action movie. We have action movies at home. Like I want to see fantasy inside out, and I feel like that's what I got. So I was happy with that. In terms of my beef with Bolinar, things improve when the parents are able to talk and we can sort of just shuffle Bolinar away is the note that I made. And this brings us to Elian's song with her parents. And I really loved the line, "You'd love me till the stars turned cold and gray." Like immediately that stood out to me, because she's basically saying, do you remember like this, and this? Do you remember saying this lullaby to me and everything? Again, not to harp on my conspiracy theory that Alan Menken and Glenn Slater knew about Wish, and so they were like slowly weaving stuff into the songs or whatever, but like all I could think of was like, oh, this would have been perfect if this was sung by Asha's grandfather or like her father, since her father's philosophy was looking to the stars for answers. Like you could have even had this thing where like, say for example, Magnifico crushed the grandfather's wish and he's starting to like forget who he is, because I wanted more extreme stakes for that movie. In the movie, like people's wishes are crushed and they're just like, ouchie, right? That happens to the mom. Like I'm thinking like, imagine like the grandfather like slowly forgets who Asha is because his wish isn't granted, right? Or his wish is crushed, I should say. And so like, imagine if she sung that to him, like, do you remember you would always say to me that you'd love me till the stars turn cold and gray, and then he doesn't remember. Like something like that would have been heartbreaking. And that would have intertwined the idea of the father's philosophy and wish of looking at the stars for answers. Wish conspiracy aside, I should say, that Alan Menken and Glenn Slater definitely like focused on the songs with Elian and her parents. Like these songs definitely felt more special compared to Advisor Villain Tango. However, I'm willing to revise my opinion on Villain Advisor Tango when like YouTubers start to cover the song. Right, again, Anna Pantsu, we're waiting for you. I've mentioned her like 3 times in this video already. I'm like, we're rooting for you. We're rooting for her. And Seji maybe? Like, I don't know, like some sort of duet. I did write a note here after this song, like with the parents, where I said, Bolinar sabotaging was funny though. I think what he did was he was eating like peanuts or something, and then he put like the shell casings as like a Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb thing, and so I thought that was funny, so he got me. So now we get to the sand section, and again we are away from another song, so I'll just title that Sand. You know, it's coarse, it gets everywhere, whatever. I thought that this was really well done. So basically what happens is that when the shadow is over the sand, they sink. When the sand is touching the sun, like in the sunlight, they can walk on it. And so basically what happens is they start to like get like stuck in it, like kind of like quicksandy, right? But then they like Elian figures out how the magic sort of works. And there's also a baby griffin who is in trouble and in danger in this scene. And so the conflict here isn't even how to get across, because Elian knows how, right? She literally tells them how they have to do it, but that the parents have like an argument about the right way to approach things and the right way to do it, because the mother wants to go around the whole thing and then the father wants to go through it, but he also doesn't seem to be paying attention to like the rocks and everything that they can jump on to like kind of get out of the sand when the sand is over the shadow, like when the shadow's over the sand, right? So it's just like they both have different ideas and they're both wrong. Like they are kind of both wrong. And I should have probably mentioned this before, but this entire time the reason why they're going through the woods is because there are these like Like, there's a pool of pixie dust, basically, and they're going towards the pixie dust. And I'm pretty sure, like, in the scene with, like, the music cave, like, Ellian can see, like, a little bit of, like, the pixie dust, right? Like, it's almost like save points, like, locations. And so anyway, so she can see the pool of the pixie dust, but this is the actual pool, not just like a little resemblance of it. Like, this is like the actual pool on the other side. Oh, wait, is it? Yeah, like she can see it from this hill, I think, and then they go in a canyon after. But anyway, so Elliot needs to rescue the baby griffin, and I like that she, like, puts her own safety aside a little bit to rescue him. It felt like that she was trying to rescue herself in that scene. She sees this, like, child in danger, and instead of thinking about herself and how she is in danger and how she literally says at some point, like, don't make me choose between you. So again, is that on the nose? Apparently people needed it to be on the nose, but that's not any of my business. So even though it was on the nose, I felt like that scene of the parents arguing and then Ellian being like, don't make me choose, was really impactful. And then you have, like, Ellian, you see how Ellian ignores her own issues to try to, like, rescue the griffin because she can't save herself in this moment because she doesn't want to choose between her parents. But if they can, like, if there's some sort of external goal and they're not focused on her, then they can all work together. Like, I guess that's what I would say. To get her out of that situation, she focused on something else. And so I like this scene because the parents use their different strengths, like, as monsters to get across the sand. Like, the dad has his strength. He pushes, like, one of the rocks so Ellian can help to get the griffin. And then the mom has the wings and stops them from, again, getting thrown off a cliff. So like I said, is it on the nose? Maybe, but I'm also like, well, so what? In terms of things being on the nose, like, the reason why we say that that's a bad thing is because it feels eye-roll worthy, right? But this didn't really, like, it didn't feel like a cliche to me, and it didn't feel like it was talking down to me, because like I said, I haven't really seen this in a Disney-like movie before, neither did my boyfriend, and like I already mentioned, obviously it wasn't clear enough because people are saying that the parents didn't learn anything and that this movie glorifies divorce and, like, that they don't fight for Ellie and, like, they don't fight for their kid, when the whole point of these sections, like, the very obvious point is to show them learning how to co-parent, like, learning how to use their strengths to work together. And I also made another note here during this section that I love that Elliot is heroic and kind. Like, she's smart when it comes to problem solving. Like, it does take her a minute, but she understands how, like, the quicksand works. So it didn't feel like too, like, Mary Sue, I know everything, but it didn't feel too, like, long either in terms of, like, girl, you're stupid. Like, the audience already knows. It's like when the audience realized it, so did she, so that was nice. And she also gets into the action herself physically, but at the same time, she's also very soft and very kind. And so I see this happening a lot with just, I don't know, a plethora of things lately, not any particular thing, but, like, you have these girl boss characters who are cold and they're hard and they don't care about anyone else and they don't give a fuck about anyone, and, like, somehow that's supposed to be strength. But I don't think that that's strength. To me, this is more strong, like having the heart of a princess, being kind, being soft, being vulnerable, but also being an active hero. And this is where we transition into the canyon scene, and there's another song here, okay? Bolinar did not need another song. I understand what they were doing because they're trying to show that Bolinar is having a change of heart. Like, the instrumental is fun and the visuals are fun, but, like, we didn't need this here. This guy cannot sing in this character voice. Like, I'm sorry. Again, like, I know that he's a Broadway actor. I know he can sing. But this was my initial impression throughout the entire movie, right? Like, before I looked people up and saw what they did, I was like, this guy can't sing. But it's that he can't sing asterisk in his character voice. Even for the best singer, even for me, I would have trouble singing and, like, maintaining pleasantness, right? Or, like, being able to hit the notes in a wide range in specific voice types. It takes a specific type of person to be able to sing in, like, their head voice versus their chest voice, like soprano versus whatever, right? But then also put on a character voice. Because for me, when I sing as a soprano, you're getting, like, Disney princess. I would have a really difficult time maintaining soprano, but, like, playing a more, like, Cassandra-like character. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? So that's kind of the pitfalls with character voices, right? So that was my initial note. I was like, oh, Bolinar, why? I'm waiting for the female cover artist to, like, to get to you. So moving on from Bolinar, because I have nothing good to say about him right now, I love the snow griffins. At least I called them snow snow griffins because they're like white and fluffy. I don't know if there's actually snow in this world, but they look sort of snowy. But anyway, they teach Ellion's parents how to parent again. And like there's this little group of like griffins, and they kind of like put Ellion with all the other griffins that are like playing and all that stuff. They're like big cats. I don't know. It was cute. And so the mom and dad mimicking like what a mom does and like what a dad does, like that was cute. And I thought like them recognizing their daughter as their daughter again was great. But then I wrote in my notes that I was like, wait a minute, things are going too well right now. There has to be a twist coming soon. Like there's too much time left for this to be a solution, because basically what you have here is like they save the griffins, they get across the canyon, and then it's like, oh, there's the magical pool of light. But I was like looking at the runtime and I was like, we're not done yet. It's not that easy, which I liked that it wasn't that easy. So we finally get to the Golden Lake of Light, and the Lake of Light shows them the argument that they had, which got them turned into these things in the first place, right? And so they say to Ellion that they do want to be human, but they are afraid that if they turn back now, they will just go back to the way that things were before. Like they aren't sure if they have learned their lesson yet, and I thought that that was a great moment for the parents. And it's a fair concern from them as well, because when you think about it, when they were turned into monsters, they lost their memories, right? So who's to say that when they turn back into humans, they'll retain everything that they learned on this journey? And so I think the fear is twofold. Basically, what is happening here is that not only do they not want to turn back because they are afraid it will undo all the lessons they learned, that they are afraid that they will turn into those, like, again, toxic people, I guess, that they were before. It's that they are also telling Ellion for the first time that regardless of the outcome, they will not be together anymore, which is something that she did not know. Like, basically, there's two layers to this. One, we can't turn back into humans because we don't want to go back to how things were before. We don't want to be arguing with each other. We don't want to be angry all the time. We don't want to have this negativity towards each other. But, like, the second thing that happens is that if we do turn back into humans, regardless, we're getting a divorce, basically. They don't say it in those words, but that's what they're saying. And so Ellion didn't know that, right? And so there's kind of like, for Ellion, I don't want to say it's a miscommunication because it's not, but what she takes in from that is that these things are like more connected than they are. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So she takes it as almost like the opposite way. After everything I did for you, like, this is the thanks I get, like, unironically, like, this is the thanks I get. This is how you repay me. Like, we went on this entire journey and you're not even gonna be together anymore. You're not even going to try. But that's not what they were saying. They were saying was that now with the, like, to me anyway, with the lessons that they learned, they are willing to try, right? That they are separating either way, but they are afraid that if they turn back into, like, humans, they are afraid that they will lose, like, the skills that they've learned to successfully co-parent together, even though either way they are separating, right? And so to them, it's not like the choice between we're separating or not separating. The choices are we can separate amicably or we can separate with, like, hate in our hearts, right? But Ellion takes that as a, oh, you're choosing not to be together after all I did for you, right? And so it's not a miscommunication, but it's more of like Elliot is getting hit with two, like, waves of information for the first time, right? And so this really shocks her, like the idea that her parents are separating no matter what they do, and then right now they don't even want to be human, right? After all she did for them too. And so I love this, like, villain moment light we have with Elliot. They were clearly foreshadowing the fact that Elliot was going to snap this entire time. Like, even from the opening song, I already mentioned that that was in my notes, that I was like, oh, forced positivity, right? But, like, I would not have been able to predict that she would get this type of moment. Like, not in a million years. I don't think, like, I've ever seen, again, like, when have you ever seen this? And this is, you know, again, as I get into, like, I don't believe that people are legitimately saying that somehow this is a worse musical than Wish. I'm like, in terms of even in Disney's entire catalog, when have you ever seen anything like this in terms of a song. I can't think of anything, right? Where you really understand her anger and her pain and she's able to be vulnerable with us, but it's not just a woe is me type vulnerable that a lot of heroines, and like, again, I don't want people to think from this video that I'm like, I don't like, you know, Ariel throwing herself on the rock and crying, because I hate that type of criticism. I hate the people that are like, oh, the original Disney princesses were all just crybabies and like the ones now are like so girl boss or whatever. Like, I hate that shit. At the same time, though, I can acknowledge like that certain tropes happen with the Disney princesses, and that I would like to see some other like types of princesses, you know what I mean? As much as I like those characters, like imagine if like Ariel got a song like this to her father, like she never does, right? And so just seeing this song, like I got full body chills in this moment. I was like, what the fuck, right? I was sitting there like flabbergasted, like in a good way, flabbergasted. I was so surprised. I love what they did with like her moment here. Because again, like when do you ever see this? They gave her really a righteous anger. Like it's not like a kid throwing a temper tantrum. It is like ready as I'll ever be, like, again, Cassandra's song from Tangled, but, like, it is righteous, like, it is justified, like, what the fuck, I did all of this stuff for an entire year, and, like, this is the thanks I get, like, I love you more than you love me. Like, that's, you know, more unique compared to, like, if you can fall out of love with each other, you can fall out of love with me, which obviously they do that too, and that still hits emotionally because that's, like, what you generally expect, and a lot of kids feel that way. A lot of kids feel like, oh, if you and mom stop loving each other, like, what would stop you from stopping to love me? You know what I mean? Like, that's something a lot of kids go through. So we have that, but the layer on top of that, the second thing was, which I feel like is less common, is I did all of this for you, but you wouldn't do anything for me. Your love is conditional. My love is not. And that was fascinating. Like, that was an interesting thing to get into. Like, this idea that, like, parents should have unconditional love for their children, and she thinks that she's the one with the unconditional love, whereas their love kind of comes with, like, strings. You know what I mean? And so I was like, oh my god, like, that was interesting. I really liked that. Like, this is the type of anger that I wish Disney would let their princesses have every once in a while. Like, Disney is too afraid to let their princesses be justifiably angry or upset, like, even though the entire world is on their shoulders. Again, Moana too. Like, this was fantastic. I love this song so much. And again, what a refreshing thing to be able to sing, because, like, I was thinking about this as I was re-listening to the songs this morning before this video. I was like, all I can think of right now in terms of remotely comparable, other than, I guess the songs in Tangled, the series, but the context of those are, like, more full villain and a little different. Like, the anger that I felt here, the only comparable things that I could think of were, like, See I'm Smiling from the last 5 years, which is about a breakup, right? And, like, Maybe I Like It This Way from the Wild Party, which is about, like, abuse. And again, they're centered on romantic relationships. It's about, like, men, right? I couldn't, like, think of another song that was this, like, angry and upset that wasn't about, like, romance. And so I really, really liked that. And I liked the climax here. I liked that they weaved in the way it was before motif, like, in this big thing. The darkness has finally come to, like, take Ellie in, right? Because now all of her dark feelings are coming out and you see her slashing at these happy memories, right? Like the last pieces of light that are inside of her heart. And so I'm assuming that that's happened with the parents too, that they were so angry that they forgot, like, the happy memories that they did have, like, with each other and their child. And so with Ellie, and it's kind of like, we see what the parents probably went through, which was, like, Elliot is rejecting the happy memories that she had with her parents, just like the parents had presumably rejected the happy memories of, like, their family. Even though I do wish that this song was a little longer, I do think that, like, this and Elian's I Want song, like, these are the standout songs. Like, these are the ones that are gonna get replayed. These are the ones I'm gonna be, like, performing my heart out in the shower, right, and all that stuff. Like, I think that those are just, like, fantastic. Again, such good. I really hope that, like, sheet music, like music notes or whatever, like releases the song soon. I don't know if this is gonna get like a published sheet music book at all. I don't know anything about that because like obviously Disney has that, but I don't know if Spellbound was like big enough for that, but like I'll get it transposed myself. But yeah, you know, if it does ever pop up, definitely like I'd recommend like put it in your book, put it in your audition book, because it's not going to be overdone either, even if there is official sheet music. It's going to be like a nice like unique thing that they haven't like heard before, but it's in a style that like most casting directors are familiar with, right? Because it's still Alan Menken and Glenn Slater. So highly recommend. Now we get into the climax of the movie, which I thought was really, really good. Some gross stuff happened with Bolinar and like his change of heart and everything, but like he's challenging the army, so I guess that's okay. But like I think that he like rallies the Finks together that he met in like that other song that I told you guys about in the canyon. And there's just like, I remember like burping magic dust and like all this stuff, so I kind of like blocked it out. I kind of blocked that part out. I was more focused on like Elian's parents working together and the general and like Nazira and like less on like the Bolinar thing felt like a worse version of like when Scuttle calls all the animals to attack Prince Eric's ship. It was kind of like that, so I'm like, okay, this is for the kids, whatever. So here's something that's important for the lesson of this movie and like what the people who are like, this is brainwashing our children or whatever, like did not understand or chose not to understand. Like the parents did not reject wanting to turn back to humans out of selfishness. They just didn't want to return to the type of people that they were before. They wanted to make sure that they actually grew from their mistakes, and how they get there is by working together to pour the river of light onto Elian to save her instead of saving themselves. And that proves their unconditional love for her. Like that proves how they love their daughter more than anything, that they would do anything for her, that despite their own issues, they will always come together for her, right? Because they're still family. Like even though you're not in love with each other anymore, you're still family. You don't need to be married to still be family. And so that's why like it baffles me, right? That like, oh, these reviews are saying the parents are selfish and like never worked on like themselves as people or never like worked on their marriage. I think, you know why? It's because people think that like working on their marriage and learning something means staying together, where you can still learn how to be a good co-parent, you can still learn how to be a family unit, but not be together anymore. So I feel like that's just code for like, oh, they divorced at the end of the movie and that means they didn't learn anything. No, those are independent from each other. They could be divorced and still learn something. You just don't want divorce to be normalized. And like, that's just so stupid, you guys. It's just so stupid. Divorce is normal. I don't know how to stress that enough. But I think what's so great about this is ultimately, she didn't even need like the whole river of light. Like, it's not even really like the river of light. It's her parents and the selfless act of true love here. And that's a transformative act of true love that rescues her. Like, not the light in of itself. It's just the action. And so again, like, that's why it really baffles me how you have all these reviews, which I think are like in bad faith, are choosing to misunderstand things on purpose, or like maybe they do genuinely think this and it's just because their literacy is not all there, right? That they didn't learn something just because they didn't stay together, when they learned how to separate while still being good parents to Elian, which is all, like, that's what all parents should be doing. Because I'm gonna mention this in my other, like, thing that I wanted to do, my little special tee-hee video, which I don't know if this is up. I may post them at the same time, just for, like, simplicity's sake. It's funny because what happens is that when parents get divorced, one parent, or sometimes even both parents, unfortunately, but usually there's one parent who decides that that's like their get out of jail free card to not parent their kid anymore, right? And so what baffles me is that people are saying like, oh, they didn't learn anything, blah, 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 this normalizes divorce. When like, to me, a normalization would have been like, oh, they get divorced and then the parent, one of the two, becomes like the weekend parent. And so this movie didn't do that. They showed how co-parenting should be. Like, this is how things should be when parents get divorced. You're still a family, even if you're not married, right? You still have a responsibility to your child, even if you're not married to each other anymore. So I thought that the movie executed that sort of lesson well, and it's kind of in the same vein of The Little Mermaid, where like the lesson here is for the parents, not for the children, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the reason why people are complaining, in the same way that parents complain about The Little Mermaid sort of in bad faith too, which I talked about in my Ursula video and a couple other things. It's like the reason why parents complain is because reflecting on what the movie is actually about would mean that they have to like look inwards in themselves and like think about whether or not they're good parents. But it's easier to be like, oh no, this movie glorifies divorce, right? Like, or whatever, right? Instead of like looking in on their own parenting. Because here's the thing, even parents that aren't separated could value from the lessons of this movie, and some people do not want to hear that. But now moving on, the parent song really gave me chills here too. Like, this is when I started to get chills. This is how I knew that we were so back. And I also really loved Ellian looking at her child self and singing the way it was before Reprise. I thought that that was really good. This is going to sound sort of strange, but like I've had dreams like that, like singing and like talking to my younger self. So that just really resonated with me emotionally. I don't know if anybody else goes through that or if it's just me, but like it's definitely happened to me before. And after like waking up from that dream, I just felt like whole inside. Like it was just a transformative type of experience. So I really liked that. And I'm also glad that my Spellbound video did not age badly. I was right with the idea being we cannot go literally back to the way things were before, but we will still have love and family. We will find a way to move forward while still being like a family, while still having love. We aren't literally going back because that can't happen, but there will be a new status quo that is still full of love and happiness and light and everything. The circumstances of our life cannot return to the way it was before because our lives are not in stasis, right? Like everything is always changing. But finding happiness again can. And this brings us to the end of the movie. So I like that we started and ended with a birthday. That's one of my favorite tropes. I really liked that. And now we get to see their co-parenting in action. Now, another criticism that like the 1-star review smooth brain people were leaving is that like it's unrealistic for a child to be this happy about their parents being divorced. But to that I would say that the entire movie was that Ellian was not happy, like the entire time, because she lost her family again. Like they quite literally showed how she was not happy. The reason why she's happy now is because her family is restored again, even if things are a little different. Like, I don't understand how, again, as someone like with divorced parents, why people are saying that, right? The reason why most children are unhappy when their parents get divorced is because one parent usually, like, typically checks out and uses that as an excuse to, like, you know, leave their child's lives, right? But Ellian has both of her parents on her birthday and they're getting along. That's not glorifying divorce, right? And a child's misery is not usually in relation to the divorce itself, but like where the parents end up and like who the parents end up being because of it. She's happy because her parents are not shitty, right? Like her parents are good. She's happy because she got her family back after all of this. A lot of kids are happier when their parents get a divorce versus when their parents were fighting and arguing with each other all the time. So again, like, I can't tell if people just misinterpreted the movie on purpose or like watched it with their eyes closed, because it's pretty clear that it's not like, oh, divorce is all sunshine and rainbows. The entire movie was like how unsunshine and rainbows divorce is. The reason why we get a happy ending is because the parents learned from their mistakes. And if people want to argue that that's unrealistic, I mean, I guess, but why is it unrealistic? I would ask you why then. Why is it unrealistic for parents to like successfully co-parent together? If you're a parent, it's because of you, right? You're saying it's unrealistic because you wouldn't do it. Like, we can make it real. It's not that this is like some fantasy magic, like bippity boppity boo bullshit. Like, we are, as human beings, have the capacity to make this happen. It is within your capacity to be like these parents, but maybe you don't want to. I don't know. And so, yeah, I just thought that that was funny because it's just so transparent and so obvious, like what people are actually complaining about. But anyway, to tie this up all nice and neat, we have the final song that is answering on the thematic question. We had My Parents Are Monsters, now we have My Monsters Are Parents, and I thought that this was cute. I thought that this was an appropriate way to end the movie, especially in terms of answering the thematic question, and I thought that, like, it was a solid ending. Now, again, because the friends do come back at the end of the movie, and there's a surprise party, like, there's a surprise party here, I would have liked my changed idea of the surprise party being at the beginning and like the pacing that I talked about earlier and how I would change it, but I thought that this was a nice, satisfying ending. We delivered on the theme that the movie promised. So yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought that it was really, really good, and I thought that the music was good, especially for Elian, which is the most important part, because let's be real, most of us are not listening to like Les Pensants, or like, I don't know, I can't think of another one right now, a Iago song from the Aladdin 2 movie, or like Olaf's song from Frozen. Like, most of us aren't really listening to that. Like, in a musical, there are definitely songs that are there to serve the musical, but you never listen to them again outside of that context, right? And so for me, the most important part of a musical is the music. And beyond the movie, the most important part of the music is the main character's music, because those are the ones that we are going to be singing. And again, that is, like I said this in my Ursula video, but you're taking the magic with you and listening to that wherever you go and being able to carry that feeling. Like, I am definitely, like, this is more that I could say, at least for Moana 2, and then also Wish. Like, I am going to genuinely listen to these songs all the time. At least Elian songs anyway. The tango song, again, we'll wait for some song covers, right? But like, that's at least a testament to how much I enjoyed this movie compared to the other movies that I've compared it to and that I've seen, is that I will actually like go back and listen to this, and that I want to think about it, and that I want to think about the themes with it, and that I can also like pick out like, oh, I changed this, I'd write this a little differently, but I really enjoyed that, and here's what I think that means. Like, to me, there's no point in anything. Like, there's no point in like art that you can't engage with. There's no point in stuff other than like just to be background noise, or just to like, I don't know, put on the TV when your family's having dinner or something, and like really is just background noise for your conversation. Like, there's no point in art that doesn't make you think about anything. I know that there are like sitcoms and like feel good shows out there and stuff like that, but like for a musical is like theater, right? And so it's different than like a TV show that like plays in between commercials and stuff like that. Like, to me, if it doesn't have anything to say, there is no point. Like, there's just no point to making it. And so this movie, as opposed to Wish and Moana 2, had something to say. Did it say it perfectly? Maybe not. But I'm just sort of like baffled at the YouTube critic response. And then, you know, obviously we'll talk about the 1-star review people. I'm just baffled because it seems just like a misunderstanding of the point of like why we're all here. Like, to say that Wish is a better musical to me is like, well, why are you here? That's what I want to know. Like, why are you here if you think that Wish is a better musical? Like, how can you like explain that to me? Explain why you think that, because to me, the reason why I'm here is not only to be entertained, but to engage with something on a more meaningful level and to like carry a piece of that with me. And I just can't do that with Wish. Maybe the answer is that you can, but I think that for a lot of people, maybe they just don't care about that anymore. They care about being like constantly entertained. So yeah, that's just how I feel about it. Again, I've said this so many times, and I've probably prefaced myself a little too much to the point where you guys think it's annoying, but it's not to shit on anyone's opinion, but I look at these opinions without explanations, and I just wonder what the explanation is. At least now you guys have mine in terms of why I feel the way I do. And it's not that people need to constantly justify the things that they like, but I would like to know the reasoning. I would like to know why. I would like to know why beyond I liked something and I disliked this other thing. I like it when people have an in-depth sort of thing about like, why? Is it just that this didn't resonate with you like on a personal level? Because I just feel like, and this feels silly to say because I know that nothing is objective, but like in an objective measurement, this has a stronger theme and executed on the theme compared to something like Wish, especially compared to Moana, which had like no theme and no point at all and nothing to say. I guess it just depends on whether or not people care about like a theme that much, but for me, like, you don't have a story if you don't have a theme. That's why we tell stories. We tell stories because we have something to say. If you have nothing to say, you have no reason to tell a story, right? I imagine that maybe some people would say, well, I don't think about the theme that much. I'm more focused on like this, and like say the action. But I'm like, well, what is the point of a good action scene if it's not leading us anywhere, if it's not leading to a compelling like message of some kind? And it doesn't need to be this giant, grand like moral or something like that, but it needs to say something about us. in human beings, at least in my opinion. So that is where we will end off on all of the Spellbound stuff. So I hope that you guys enjoyed. This may take me a little while to edit compared to usual, but I hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys had fun. This has been Calxiyn caring way too much, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!